Pickswise is the number one app for sports betting picks, helmed by a team of trend-watching, data-devouring sports fanatics, giving you the who, how, and why behind every prediction for every game, every day, and every sport. Loaded with best bets, props, and parlays, you can find in-depth analysis on every game, all for free. Found your pick? Search the latest sportsbook promotions to sign up for an account, compare the odds, and finally place your bet. Download the free Pickswise app now to make your next bet better. Pickswise backs responsible gambling. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
What is crack-a-lackin', Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Favale coming at you once more without my fantabulous co-host, Adam Prommel. I am pumped up, full of caffeine, ready to talk about the next team on our look-ahead train. It's the Utah Jazz. Tony Jones of The Athletic was nice enough to come on and chat with me for about an hour, covering everything and anything about the Jazz heading into this season, and even a little bit longer term than that. He covers the Utah Jazz and the NBA at large a little bit for The Athletic. He's at T Jones on the NBA on Twitter, at T Jones on the NBA, spelled exactly as it sounds. Great conversation. Highly recommend it with a team where there is more to talk about than I think meets the eye. You look at the top 7 players in their rotation just being back, and you can kind of write it off as, oh, there's continuity. They have Rudy Gay. They got Eric Paschall. They added Hassan Whiteside. Drafted Jared Butler, who might end up being one of the steals of the draft. We get into all of that, but there's a lot more to talk about with this team than their continuity suggests. Before we get started, my usual housekeeping notes / please. Pretty please. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Hardwood Knocks wherever you get your podcast, whether you actually use iTunes. So long as you have access to it, we ask that you take 10 seconds, search Hardwood Knocks, throw us a 5-star rating, write a review. Those help us out on the charts a crap ton. Cannot reiterate how much that helps us. If this is your first time listening to this podcast because you're a diehard Utah Jazz fan, Tony retweeted this and you decided to click on it, you're here somehow by accident, consider throwing us that permanent subscription, downloading all our episodes. We are pleasantly sub-mediocre when it comes to covering the entire NBA at large. We're only mildly to modestly insufferable, which I think that's a pretty high compliment when looking at today's NBA league-wide media landscape. Follow us on Twitter at Hardwood Knocks. Follow us on YouTube, youtube.com, search Hardwood Knocks, hit that subscribe button. And we're on Instagram at Hardwood_Knocks. Without further delay, let's get to talking all things and then some Utah Jazz with Tony Jones. Thank you so much for coming back to the Hardwood Knocks podcast to talk some Utah Jazz with me ahead of the start of this season. First and foremost, though, how are you doing?
I am good. Thank you for having me. I'm fired up. I'm ready for the season to start. And what are we, 9 days out now? Or wait a minute, when are we publishing the podcast?
It'll be about 8 days out. So we're recording late Sunday night. It's going up on Monday.
Yeah.
So,
okay, so we'll be 8 days out. Yes.
It's coming.
I'm ready to go.
It's good that you're ready because as I've been going through these things, I keep thinking that I probably could have used like another 10 or 12 days of the off season. I'm not going to lie.
Why?
Another 10 or 12 days just as to get my bearings a little bit more. I probably would have liked to have had more of these podcasts out for one, but I think we're in kind of a marathon of basketball ever since the bubble and the off seasons have been shortened. I'm excited as always, but I could have used probably another just, maybe like 10 days, week and a half.
That is fair. So I agree with you there. I mean, so next, so the flip side is, right, like next year at this time, well, not at this time, but next year we're going to have a regular off season and we're going to have like 6 weeks of nothing instead of like 3 or 4 weeks of nothing. And
right.
we're all going to be like fiending.
Yeah.
At that point. So,
I mean, look, Twitter was fiending already. So if you give them another 2, 3, 4 weeks on top of what we just had, I'll have to remove myself from social media for a little bit.
Well, that's the thing. Like you give another 3 or 4 weeks, like, the takes are going to fly.
Yeah.
So.
With the Jazz specifically, is there, before even getting into the roster, just kind of looking at how the past 2 seasons ended where there were legitimate explanations for what happened, but they did blow 2 leads, first in the bubble, the 3-1 lead, and then this past year against a Clippers team. Yes, Mike Conley's banged up, Donovan Mitchell's banged up, but the Clippers don't have Kawhi. They're up 2-0, don't even get to a game 7. Is there there's always a sense of urgency with a team that's this good, but is there maybe a little bit more of a sense of urgency just given how their past 2 postseasons ended?
I think there has to be. I think the balance that they have to strike is, um, the sense of urgency combined with not panicking. Like
Mhm.
they have to be, secure in who they are as a team, but they have to be urgent at the same time. And the urgency that that's around the franchise is frankly, out of the control of the players, right? So
Mhm.
what's the urgency? The urgency is that next year, this franchise becomes a repeater luxury tax
Yep.
franchise, correct? So that's the urgency there. So, next summer, whether this Jazz team wins a championship or not, there's going to be some pretty difficult decisions that have to be made, above the level of the players. So that's the urgency there. The urgency that's probably in the players' control is that Rudy Gay's 35 years old. Joe Ingles is approaching his mid 30s. Bojan Bogdanovic is in his 30s. Mike Conley is 34 years old and starting to develop a history of soft tissue injuries,
Mhm.
things like that. So, the urgency, urgency there is okay. You know, maybe the core of the team. Donovan Mitchell is 25 and Rudy Gobert is 29 and still in his prime. Um, but the core pieces around the two star pieces, are getting a little bit long in the tooth. So there's urgency there, and I think the general urgency is that in the NBA, windows aren't open very long for small market teams. They
Yeah, for sure.
just aren't. Like if you're a small market team, you better well take advantage of it. I mean, even the Cleveland Cavaliers, with one of the three greatest players, ever, their window wasn't open very long. So it's definitely it's definitely one of those things where I mean the Jazz have a window. Um, you probably wouldn't label them the specific favorite, but I mean they're a team that's probably a contender, and they're a team that if to me if they're going to make that breakthrough to get past that second round to get to the Western Conference Finals or the NBA Finals or whatever, it's probably going to have to come this year.
And if you are them, and you already sort of alluded to this when you were going through Bogdanovich, Conley, Joe Ingles, and their age, among those three, is there any one like specifically that you might be concerned of seeing a little bit more of a starker drop off from, just given how advanced they are up in years? I mean, you can even go with Rudy Gay, like you said, he's 35, and they just added him to the team as well.
Yeah, I mean, is I'm probably the most worried about Joe Ingles because, um, you know, I've seen past 2 or 3 years, um, he hasn't looked fresh in the playoffs. He hasn't looked fresh in the postseason. So if I'm the Jazz, I'm probably going to be, really careful with him this year, to try to keep him fresh for the postseason. Um, I'm worried. I'd be worried about Mike Conley, not because of his game. I think his game is actually, pretty darn good at this level. I mean, at this age, I think his game is pretty close to his prime. But soft tissue injuries are soft tissue injuries, and when they start happening to 30 year olds, hamstrings at the wrong time, that's something that you have to be worried about. So if I'm the Jazz, especially with having Jared Butler this year, I'm going to be really careful with Mike Conley. Like if I were the Jazz, I might not even play Mike Conley in back-to-backs this year at
Okay,
all.
wow.
Um, so it's those are the two that stand out to me. I think Bogdanovich is, obviously his game is, he's such a catch and shoot threat, and he's such a threat, off the dribble, in terms of closeout situations. Um, he's held up pretty well. I think that Rudy Gay, once he reinvented his game, he's held up really well. I thought he was really good in San Antonio last year. So it's a mix and a match. I think that, as long as they're healthy, the two constants during the regular season are going to be, have to be Mitchell and Gobert, and then you just kind of mix and match around those two.
The Rudy Gobert discourse, as per usual, veered too far from reality, I think, after that Clippers series. And people sort of just harp on the fact that LA was smaller, and is that really a problem for Gobert? Where it seems like the real problem was the players. He doesn't just have athletic defenders in front of him. That's going to make his life more difficult when he has to deal with having like a team that can spread the floor from all five positions. I've also seen people mention that, and this is the one that I'm most curious about, that he needs to figure out a way, or the Jazz need to figure out a way for him to punish those sorts of lineups on offense because he's so much bigger. Is that something, looking offensively, that the Jazz actually need to focus? Like, what does that look like? Are you really tossing the ball to Rudy Gobert in the post against a smaller dude just to try and capitalize on that size advantage?
Well, I mean, the thing that you look at on an obvious perspective is the very next series, Phoenix played the Clippers out of that small lineup because they did that with DeAndre Ayton. Mm-hmm. Like they said, okay, if you're going to put Nick Batum or Terrence Mann or whoever, on Ayton, we're going to throw Ayton the ball, and he's going to score, and he's going to go to the offensive boards, and he's going to do a number of things. But also, Phoenix was healthier than the Jazz last year, particularly their perimeter guys. So those guys were able to stay in front of people. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing with what happened with the Jazz against the Clippers. It wasn't Rudy Gobert. It was the fact that the other four guys around Rudy couldn't stay in front of anybody. And so, you had, Donovan Mitchell wasn't able to stay in front of anybody. Mike Conley, in the game that he came back, he obviously couldn't stay in front of anybody. Those two guys were hurt. Royce O'Neale had issues with Paul George, but that was, Paul George was playing at pretty much an all-time level for him. Mm-hmm. Kawhi Leonard was getting whatever he wanted. So it was putting Rudy in impossible situations. Okay, so do I help off of my guy? And then, if I help off of my guy, then there's a guy in the corner that's going to be taking practice level jump shots. And the Jazz made the decision that for that game 6, they were going to leave Terrence Mann open. And, and Terrence Mann, to his credit, took advantage of that. So, I don't, I think anybody who saw those games, who wants to be honest with themselves, and knows the game of basketball, it should have been obvious that, that wasn't on Rudy. That was an entire team collapsing defensively. And, if you want to say that Rudy Gobert got played off the floor by the Clippers, I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's not accurate, but, it's fine. That's your prerogative. So, the point of Rudy being able to punish teams offensively, France did it in the Olympics. And they threw on the ball, and if you drop the pass, they threw on the ball again. Whether that translates to the NBA, that's one thing. But I mean, it at least worked a little bit in international basketball. But if the Jazz are going to beat small ball lineups, they're just going to have to guard better, 1-on-1, and that's what they didn't do against the Clippers.
Slow is just right if you're on vacation, a sloth, or describing QuickBooks. More like slow books. It sucks you in and slows you down with manual processes, integration difficulties, and glitchy delays that leave you scrambling for the numbers you need. Now is the time to make the switch to NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 financial system, because NetSuite gives you visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, e-commerce, and more. It's everything you need to grow, all in one place. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time, no matter how big your business grows. Failing to switch to NetSuite will leave you stuck trying to make sense of your books while your competitors sprint ahead. 93% of surveyed businesses increased visibility and control since switching to NetSuite. And right now, special financing is back. NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind financial program only for those ready to switch today. Head to netsuite.com/bluewire right now. Get special financing at netsuite.com/bluewire. One more time, netsuite.com/bluewire.
No team can afford to overpay for talent. Build a championship team with Indeed the smart way by only paying for quality candidates that meet your must-have requirements. Get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/bluewire. When hiring gets hard, you need Indeed, the job site that makes hiring incredibly simple. Just attract, interview, and hire. In fact, with Indeed, you can do all of your hiring in one place, even interviewing. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/bluewire. Indeed knows how important it is to make the most of your recruiting hours and dollars. With Indeed, you can save time and money by setting your must-have qualifications and only paying for the quality candidates that meet them. Indeed.com/bluewire. Offer valid through October 31st. Terms and conditions apply.
The thing that's probably more concerning to me is what has happened the past 2 seasons to their defense with Rudy Gobert off the court. And I'm wondering if you think they're better built to navigate those stretches when he's on the bench. And will they even, I think a lot of people have wondered with the addition of Rudy Gay in the non-Gobert minutes, in the, 13 to 18 minutes that he's not on the floor per game, for any of that time, will they experiment going actually smaller? Or should we be expecting Hassan Whiteside still to soak up a majority of those stretches and the Jazz will play with a traditional big?
So the thing about it is that in the regular season last year, the Jazz were actually pretty good in the non-Rudy Gobert minutes, because Quinn Snyder found, a formula that worked, right? Like he brought Derek Favors in to play with, most of the starting lineup. Those guys held their own for, the back half of first quarters. And then Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert came back and they obliterated second units. So, and then that all changed in the playoffs when they ran into the Clippers, because the Clippers were able to dictate matchups by going small. So, the question, I don't want to say the better question, but I think the question for me is, how matchup proof can the Jazz get between now and the playoffs, 7, 8, 9 months from now, or however long that we have to go until the playoffs. And that's what's going to ultimately determine their destiny. Because throughout Quinn Snyder's tenure as head coach, the problem is that they have not been matchup proof. They run into, a team that can spread them out. It becomes detrimental for them. The difference this year, from all of the other years is it didn't matter whether they were matchup proof or not. Those teams were just better. The Houston teams were just better. The Golden State teams were just better. Last year was the first team that they had that you could say, okay, this team can make a deep playoff run. So, and that's why, that and the recency bias, that's why it's such a stark, it's such a stark, memory in your mind. So, the question going forward for this Jazz team is if they run into the Clippers in the playoffs, and those guys try to go small, or those guys go small. If they run into another team and they go small, or if they run into the Los Angeles Lakers and those guys play two bigs, can they match up or match down?
That's a good point.
To whatever matchup they have to face.
One of the things they do have going for them is that one of their two most important players only just turned 25 in Donovan Mitchell. He was so good last year. I thought really weaponized his off the dribble three. There are still things that you can obviously harp on about his game. I thought that his overall shot selection felt like it got a little bit better. What does the next step from Donovan Mitchell look like? Like, what are you looking or thinking that he needs to improve upon the most going forward to help take this team sort of to that next plane?
Yeah, I think the ability to manage a game is his next step, right? And when I say manage a game, right, like I'm thinking Mike Conley, Chris Paul, those guys are like maestros, right? They know exactly who to get the ball to, when to get the ball to that guy, how to get the ball to that guy that needs the ball. They know exactly which play to run. They know exactly which matchup to exploit. And if Donovan Mitchell, it's, I use Chris Paul as an extreme example. It's going to be hard for anybody to ever run a team like Chris Paul runs a team. But if Donovan Mitchell gets better at running a team to go with what he is as an offensive threat, he becomes really lethal in terms of what he is as a basketball player. Because as a scorer, especially as a playoff scorer, he's proving to be one of the best in the game. And so I think I think defense is an obvious place that you can point to. Defensively, I use Stephen Curry as an example. And so the reason why I use Stephen Curry as an example, right? Because defensively, Stephen Curry is never in a vacuum going to be an above average defender. But what he is an extremely competitive defender. So if you get Stephen Curry in space on an island, you can take advantage of him. But what Stephen Curry does well defensively is he works hard to not allow himself to get on an island and be taken advantage of. So, you're never going to ask Donovan, like you asked Donovan Mitchell, okay, we need you to go and score 26 points a game. We need you to get 5 or 6 assists a game. We need you to handle 35 to 40% of the offensive possessions. We need you to expend a lot of energy offensively. So we don't need you to be Kawhi Leonard defensively. But if he can get to like the level of where Curry is like super competitive defensively and not a detriment, then he becomes a much better overall player. So I think that's the example I would use for Curry there. I mean, for Donovan Mitchell there.
And he's someone who has like the capability of proving defensively, right? I guess if you're worried about how much energy he's expending on offense and the usage there, how much energy he has on defense is certainly something to think about. But when you watch him as an actual player, he feels like someone who should be better on defense from the point of attack, from even whatever it is, whether he's away from the ball, whether he's just, in the corners. He feels like someone who should be on better at defense than he is, correct?
Yeah, so here's a great example of that, right? Perfect example of that, actually. So 2 years ago, Game 7 against Denver in the first round, Jamal Murray's been absolutely destroying the Jazz throughout that entire series, right? Like dropping 50, doing whatever. And so for that Game 7, Donovan Mitchell, for a large part of that Game 7, Mike Conley did as well. They both took, they said, okay, we're going to sit down on Jamal Murray, and we're going to move our feet, and we're going to expend a lot of energy defensively. And that game turned into a rock fight. I believe it was like, what was the final score of that game? It was like 82-81 or something like that. And Donovan Mitchell was really, really good defensively on Jamal Murray in that one game. And he was really bad offensively. And he was really bad offensively because he was exhausted, because he had expended so much energy defensively. And he turned the ball over, I believe, on the final, the next to last offensive possession, just because he didn't have the juice in his legs to get to where he needed to go. So that you have to. So you don't want Donovan Mitchell to be a turnstile defensively, but you also don't want him to max out his legs defensively and not be able to carry you offensively. So it's a balance, and it's a balance that they're going to have to strike. But the best players in the league, the best players in the league are guys that get it done on both ends of the floor. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see if Donovan can take that next step, and take that next step in his development.
Jordan Clarkson was super good last season. We did see some of his shooting percentages slip off as the year went on. Do you see that performance that he had last year as something that he can repeat this season?
I think it's going to depend on where his jumper is, and and if he's able to if he's able to continue to get separation to figure out the shooting, and because he shot the ball really well in the first half of the season, he didn't shoot the ball well in the second half of the season. But the thing that separated Jordan Clarkson from me last year was, he was getting into the lane off the dribble, and he's getting to the basket. He was finishing around the basket. He wasn't quite as good as that in the second half of the season. And I think that he has to try to get back to that as well. But he was somebody who carried the offense off the bench in large stretches last year. I remember a game in Indiana last year where it was something like the Jazz's third game in 4 nights. They were on the road. It was a Sunday game. Donovan Mitchell was clearly exhausted. I don't think Mike Conley was playing. Donovan had like nothing in his legs. And, they were in the fourth quarter for like 8 minutes. The Jazz just was like, "Here, Jordan, you go ahead. You take this possession." And, and Clarkson created shot after shot and basket after basket, and they ended up winning that game. And, and that's stuff that Jordan did for the Jazz a lot last year. So, I don't think, I don't expect them to have, that was kind of a career year. I don't know if he can get back to that level. But the impact that he's had for the Jazz in his 2 years with the team, it's been pretty notable.
Yeah, I think the idea of Jordan Clarkson, even when his shots aren't always going in, at least it does. He plays in a way where defenses are almost always going to react, which helps them. But there's definitely a noticeable difference if his jumper is not falling. He's still, like, his first half or half plus of last season, though, he was just absolutely molten. This question feels pointless to ask for most contenders, but I was going over some Jared Butler film the other day. Is he someone that could actually crack like the top 10 players like in the rotation on this team, or is that very much a non-starter?
I think he's number 10, or I think he has a chance to be number 10. So your starting five, you have Donovan Mitchell, you have You have Mike Conley, you have Royce O'Neale, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Rudy Gobert. You know, Jordan Clarkson and Joe Ingles are 6 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
Rudy Gay is number 8. Hassan Whiteside is number 9. So number 10 and number 11 right now. So for number 10, you have, Jared Butler, Miye, Elijah Hughes, and Eric Paschall, all kind of vying for that number 10 spot. And Jared Butler's, pretty obviously been the best of those guys. So I mean, I would think that he has a shot to be number 10. But the caveat is this, Quinn Snyder goes 9. So if you're number 10, you're still not playing every night. You're playing when one of the 9 is not there. So the question that I have is this: if Rudy Gay misses time in the regular season with the off-season surgery on his heel, who's number 10? Because if Mike Conley or Donovan Mitchell or Jordan Clarkson or even Joe Ingles, if one of those 4 misses a game, then I'm going to guess that Jared Butler is the guy that steps in for one of those guys. But if Rudy Gay misses a game, and that's a true front court guy, then do you go small and put Jared Butler in as your number 10 guy, or do you give Elijah Hughes or Eric Paschall the first crack to take Rudy Gay's minutes? And I think that's, if Rudy Gay misses time at the beginning of the regular season, I think that's a fascinating question that's going to be answered for me.
That was my actual next question, was between looking at Oni, Eric Paschall, and Elijah Hughes. Which one do you think would have the best chance of making an actual impact on this team this season?
I'm still going to say Eric Paschall because he's capable of playing small ball 5. And I think that they're going to use him as such. I think the issue for him is he's got to start making shots. I think that outside of making shots, I think he's played relatively well. I think he's really good off the dribble for a big guy. I think that he can make quick decisions off the dribble. I think he can pass the ball when he attacks closeouts, things like that. I think that as a pick and popper, he does the right things. He's just got to start making shots, and he's only made like 1 or 2 shots during the preseason so far, and he's had a lot of open threes. And if you're going to play for Quinn, you gotta make open shots. So I think that's what he's got to show in the next few preseason games.
I had thought, like, just before seeing anything in the preseason or looking at what the rotation was, I thought maybe it would be Oni, just because of, he's 6'5", has the 6'11" wingspan, but he doesn't even seem like he's been like a huge staple in their preseason. Is that just something they're out on? Has he been dealing with an injury or something that I'm just not aware of, or what is the story there?
Yeah, I think that he's been, I think that the Jazz have been taking a pretty long look at Elijah Hughes. And I think that Hughes has played well in the preseason, especially in making shots. Now with Oni, I can never count him out because he has a specific skill that helps this team, which is his ability to defend on the perimeter. But he's another guy that's got to start making shots. And one thing we know about Quinn Snyder, I mean, he values shot making. So I think that's something that's got to happen as well for Miye. But I do think the Jazz really like him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there as well.
Well, you warmed my heart by making it seem like Jared Butler has a chance to crack the top 10 of the rotation. So I'm going to be in a good mood for at least the next 36 hours because
Oh well, I mean that's not lip service. The Jazz really like Jared Butler.
I really
Like
like Jared Butler. I
like
still can't believe he
really,
topped the 40.
yeah. They really like Jared Butler, and the stuff that he's shown in the preseason, I gotta like there have been multiple times during both preseason games that I've had to say, you know what, it's just preseason. We don't know if this is going to translate to the regular season, but there are things that he does. There are things that I've seen in the preseason that he's done off the dribble that the only two guys on that team that can do that off the dribble are Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell. And yeah, so
Yeah, I know it's preseason, but his control over the game with some of those moments with the ball in his hands, and he had that huge game against Dallas. That's just, man, that's just like that. It just doesn't look like rookie level stuff, and it's even though it's preseason, and I know it doesn't necessarily matter like what his draft position was. Like that is still the number 40 pick. I'm still just floored that, and I know the reasons why he fell that far. I know the health concerns people had. I'm still just that could end up being just like a phenomenal steal for Utah if we fast forward a few years down the line, not even looking at this season specifically.
So he made a move in isolation against Reggie Bullock, who is a good defender. But that's what makes it so silly. He made a move against Reggie Bullock in isolation where, hit him with a crossover, backed up, hit him with another crossover, and then hit him with a step back to where the separation that he gained, he was above the break. He was above the arc on the break, and Reggie Bullock was basically at the foul line. So that's like five. How many feet of separation is that? Like 5 or 6 feet. I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of insane for an NBA player to be able to do to another NBA player.
yes, I remember the shot you're talking about. He his step back. It felt like he traveled 6 feet when he was gathering towards behind the 3-point line. He also, I don't watch enough of college basketball to maybe have known this, but he seems like he just has a little he had a floater. I think it was like in the fourth quarter of that game where it's just like showcasing absolute control over how to navigate the defense and just have that little push shot in there. He's more of an every level scorer than I thought that he actually was coming in.
Yeah, he's a 3-level guy. He's got the floater in the lane. He can finish at the basket, and obviously he's proficient from above the arc. So, and he's just really, really good off the dribble. He's just really good off the bounce, and he's a really good pick and roll player. So what are the questions about Jared Butler, right? We question the health. That's an obvious question. But the other question is, okay, he's not overly big. He's not overly athletic, but the skill level that he has is so high that the skill level is so high that some of that stuff doesn't matter, and his ability to run pick and roll is just tremendous. So, and the thing about it is he's versatile offensively in terms of his style of play. So he can play with the ball in his hands, and he can play without the ball in his hands. So that means a lot because that means he can play with Donovan Mitchell, or he can play with Mike Conley, or he can play with Ingles, or he can play with Clarkson. He doesn't have. There's not a lineup that he has to be out there with just because of his style of play. And I don't think people realize how difficult that is. There are guys who, if they don't have the ball in their hands, they're just not going to be effective at all. And he's effective with or without the ball in his hands. So that's something that really helps him.
Looking at this roster in whether it's a position, like an archetype of a player, whatever, what do you view as Utah's biggest weakness heading into this year?
I still don't think they have the definitive guy who, could just go out there. I think they need one more wing defender.
Yeah, for sure.
I really like Royce O'Neale. I think he's a tremendous defender below the foul line. I think he's the level drops off once he gets above the foul line. Rudy Gay's defensive numbers last year were really good. But, can you say, okay, soak up, 10 to 12 possessions in a row on Kawhi Leonard or Paul George or whatever? Can he do that, at a playoff level? I don't know. So I think that if you are Justin Zanuck, I think that the one thing that you might want to do is still try to figure out if you can get a wing defender at some point over the course of the year. Even look at Phoenix, right? Like, they know. Number one, Mikal Bridges is. He's
Amazing.
Yes, he's amazing. And Cam Johnson is pretty darn good himself. But if they need 3 or 4 possessions, or if they needed 3 or 4 possessions last year, what did they do? They looked down and benched Torrey Craig. Go in there, give us 3 or 4 possessions on this guy. And I don't think the Jazz have that guy right now.
Also, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead. I'm listening.
I was just going to say the thing with Rudy Gay too, where he was kind of fine defensively, is he was more of a, you call him a perimeter big. That's not someone that San Antonio was just hey, go out and defend wings at the age of, 34, 35.
Right. Exactly.
You mentioned Royce O'Neale, by the way, really quickly. And this is something that I had been doing a while ago over the offseason that, it floored me when you talk about it, but it makes sense. Just contextualizing how important he is or how much Utah relies on him. There were 404 players who logged at least 250 minutes last year. B-Ball Index does this thing where they measure how much time they spent on the highest usage player defensively. Royce O'Neale led the league in the amount of defensive possessions he spent guarding the highest usage player on the other team among those 404 players. That's, I think he's great, but you just need you need to diversify that perimeter defense somehow beyond having a Joe Ingles there or just staying the course with, sometimes you're looking at that. If Donovan Mitchell improves, maybe that helps, but you can't really expect Mike Conley to get better, Joe Ingles to get better. Bojan Bogdanovic has these nights where he looks really good one-on, but he's just never going to be that guy. So that's basically just my Royce O'Neale appreciation rant.
Yeah. So full disclosure, I voted Royce O'Neale second team all defense last year.
That's not egregious at all. I think that's totally fine.
I think I was one of 4 who gave him a vote. But he completely deserved it just because it was just okay, we're playing Kawhi, we need you to go get Kawhi. Tomorrow night we got LeBron, so go get LeBron. Tuesday night we got Giannis, so have fun with that. Oh, by the way, this road trip continues. We got Kevin Durant the next day. So, yeah, go ahead. Good luck with that. We all got your back. We good, Royce. So, I thought he was terrific. Credit the Clippers for being able to figure out how to, get those guys out in space and do what they did. But Royce throughout the entire season, he was pretty darn important to what the Jazz were able to do, and I think that he'll be really important this year as well. And I will say this: I think that this is somewhere where I think that Eric Paschall can help. And what I mean is this: I think Royce, in large part last year, was Utah's toughest player, and Eric Paschall is a tough guy, and I think Rudy Gay is a tough guy as well, and Donovan is a tough guy, but you can't have your best player or one of your 2 best players be the tough guy because they can't be the ones taking the technical fouls. Mm-hmm. So I think I think that Eric Paschall can help in that vein.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a great point, and I don't think there's any issue with. I think Royce O'Neale is an all defense caliber defender, so I would agree with you there. I mean, like, look, the dude he is 6'4", and like they're throwing him up against monster wings, or like you're seeing reps against actual fours, is just incredible. This question, I don't mean to make it so simple, but I think when you just look at the Jazz, you already mentioned their top 7 guys they should be the same from last year. And so you make those slighter tweaks towards the middle to back end of the rotation with a Rudy Gay, a Hassan Whiteside, as Eric Paschall play. What's the actual path to this team being better? Because we've talked a lot about regression from last season, but being better than last season. When you look at all they did, especially in the regular season, having the best record and all that, what is the pathway to them being even better than that?
So the pathway to being better is being a better playoff team. That's the pathway. So this team could theoretically be a 3 seed, but be a better team if they become a better playoff team. So the pathway for that to me is Rudy Gay and Donovan Mitchell, because I think Donovan Mitchell has another level that he can hit. I think he has another clear level that he can hit. And the second thing is, I think that Rudy Gay, if this signing goes the way the Jazz are hoping it goes, he adds stuff to this team that it didn't have. Like, I don't think that there was a front court guy that the Jazz could come down and say, "Go get me a bucket" in a playoff setting. And I think Rudy Gay can do that. I don't think that there was a guy that that you could say, okay, we need you to guard the 4, or we need you to go ahead and guard the 5, or we need you to spend 1 or 2 possessions at the 3. And I think Rudy Gay could possibly do that. I think that by the end of Game 6 last year against the Clippers, I think that the Jazz were down to 7 guys that Quinn Snyder trusted. Mm-hmm. And, for all of the depth that we talked about last year with the Jazz, by the end of the playoff run, they were down to 7 guys that Quinn trusted to put out there on the floor. And I think Rudy Gay gives you, at very minimally, gives you 8 guys, which is more conducive to being a better playoff team. And I also think Jared Butler makes them better, because
hell yes, love it.
Oh, you were ready for this. Jared Butler makes you better because I think you have a 4th guy in the backcourt that's an NBA player. And I think last year there were 3. So if Mike Conley missed the game last year, Joe Ingles was playing point guard, and that proved to be really detrimental, because by the end, by the time the playoffs started, Joe Ingles was cooked. He was exhausted. So, there were 2 things I would do with Joe Ingles if I were the Jazz this year. Number 1, I would find some time to rest him during the regular season, and number 2, I would not give him any point guard minutes, like none. Even though I know that Joe Ingles can play point guard and can handle the point, nah. Give those minutes. If Mike Conley misses time, give those minutes to Jared Butler. If Donovan Mitchell misses time, give those minutes to Jared Butler. If Jordan Clarkson misses time, give those minutes to Jared Butler. So I think that those two theoretically, we don't know how it's going to look during the regular season, but theoretically, that makes the Jazz a deeper team. And then then the Jazz have to work on number one, being a better playoff team, and number two, being a more matchup-proof playoff team.
There are probably two ways to look at it. And you mentioned one where you're saying if you're the Jazz, like the goal is still to figure out a way to go out and get another wing. I think you could also frame this question as this team is in the second consecutive year slated to pay the luxury tax at least, and their bill is not insubstantial at the moment, compared to how much they went over last year. We're talking like their tax payment's going to be double digits this year as of right now. Who do you think, just based off what the Jazz need or what you think could happen this season, who on this roster right now would you bill as the player most likely to be traded before the deadline?
I never like to try to go down that road because I don't know if saying that is fair to the player.
Okay.
But here's the thing, right? Like here's the thing, and this is what I know of Justin Zanuck. The man is not afraid to make a move. 2 years ago, I'll give you a story. I was interviewing Jeff Green when he was waived 2 years ago in Miami. Like the Jazz had just acquired Jordan Clarkson. They had just traded Dante Exum for Jordan Clarkson in Miami. And I went up to Jeff and I said, "Hey, you played with Jeff, in Cleveland. Can I just talk to you about what Jordan brings to the team?" And he gives me, like 3 or 4 long, thoughtful answers. And then I leave the locker room and I get a text from a source that said, "Yo, you might want to check this out. I'm hearing that Jeff Green got waived." I was like, the game just ended. And the source was like, "Yeah, I know. It's cold world." And so I made a phone call and I confirmed it. And, and me and my colleague, we reported the story. And I remember players coming out of the locker room like, "What in the world just happened?" And, I think that's the one thing that we know. I think that's the one thing that we really know about Justin Zanuck. Like if there's a move to be made, he's going to be aggressive and trying to make that move because that's just how he's wired as a GM. So, that's a long story. I mean, it's a long-winded way of saying that if Justin Zanuck feels that there's a guy that can help this team with a specific skill set that can help this team, and he feels that somebody's got to go, then somebody's going to go. I guess that's the answer that I have, or the best answer that I have.
And so do you think Justin Zanuck, and just given how far they are into the tax, I think they're like 18 million over or something as of right now. Like it's a wild number. Do they have the license to stay that far over the tax this season?
Yeah, they're fine. I think they're fine for this year.
Okay.
I think next summer is when, I think you're going to see some decisions being made, especially if this team goes out in the second round. Like if this team goes out in the second round and doesn't make a strong playoff push, I think that you're going to see a significantly different roster next year.
That would make a lot of sense, especially coming back to the urgency conversation we had. Just a couple quick ones before I get you out of here. I think this is an easy answer because there's really only 2 options, even though you could argue it's matchup dependent. What's going to be their go-to crunch time lineup? Is it just the projected starting 5? Do we see maybe Joe Ingles in there instead of, Bojan Bogdanovic at one point? What do you think is just going to end up being their go-to this season down the stretches of close games?
I think that's a better question than you think it is.
Okay. I like it when I don't ask terrible questions. I appreciate you saying that.
So Conley and Mitchell and Gobert are obvious. Those are your obvious three. And then, and I think Royce belongs. Royce belongs with that because, he's obvious the guy that defends. That's going to defend other crunch time scores. So I think those four are most obvious. And then, I think that fifth spot can be rotated. I think it can be Bojan Bogdanovic one night or a couple nights. I think it could be Rudy Gay a couple nights. I think it could be Joe Ingles a couple nights. I think that those are pretty much I think there are going to be four constants, and I think that there are going to be other guys that fifth spot can kind of rotate a little bit.
If you're Quinn Snyder, is there like a weird, offbeat, unconventional lineup that you would try out just to see what would happen with that group of five guys?
I would love to see. I think it would be fun to see Jared Butler, Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Joe Ingles, and Rudy Gay.
Ooh, that would be fun.
That would be a fun lineup. Not only to see, because if you have three guys that are just that good off the dribble and that good at creating shots, but I'd love to see if those guys can actually stop anybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to see that lineup.
The one I have penciled in is also that 3-guard structure with Conley, Jared Butler, and Donovan Mitchell. I have, it's sort of a less of an oddball cap off with, I want Royce O'Neale and Rudy Gobert in there because I was thinking, was I going too far out there with that 3-guard lineup? And like, how would this defense, let me just take the Jazz's two best defenders and throw them next to those three. But in general, I would love to see the 3 guards play together and what that looks like.
Well, see, and that's the question, right? Like, if Rudy Gay misses some regular season time, do you throw those 3 guards together?
I would absolutely do it, but Quinn Snyder is a lot smarter than I am, so who knows the actual answer to that question?
Right. That's the thing. So, I mean, especially because they're so like size, like they're all 6'1" or 6'2".
Yeah,
so you're gonna have somebody guarding a 6'7" guy. But the gist of that is they got to guard them on the other end, and that could be problematic.
Utah's over-under as we record this for this season is 53.5 wins. Would you predict them to hit the over or the under on that?
I think they go over. I think this is a really good basketball team, like great even. I happen to think that this team will go 51-31 if they have a bunch of injury issues and they don't play well. So if they have a normal season, I think they're going to win a lot of games. So I'm gonna take the over on that.
I think I would agree with you there, and it also feels like as I think difficult as it is to sort of come up with a hierarchy in the West. Maybe this is too ambitious, but when you look at Jamal Murray's injury in Denver, Kawhi in Los Angeles, some uncertainty elsewhere, it feels like Utah's floor might be like 3rd in the West this regular season. Is that too high for their floor?
I think that Phoenix, Utah, and the Lakers,
like that's the tier,
are in the top tier in the West. I don't know what order those 3 finish, but I think that, like, particularly the Jazz and Phoenix, I think both of those teams are really, really good. Like, I think the Jazz are really good. I think the Phoenix is going to be really good. I think the Lakers are going to be a team that, might not be really good at first, but by the time the playoffs start, they're really good. Jamal Murray being out until, March kind of puts them on a different tier. Kawhi being out puts the Clippers on a different tier. I don't think that as good as Luka is, I'll probably have Dallas fourth at this point. I'll probably have Golden State somewhere in between fifth, sixth, or seventh. But those three for me stand out.
Dallas is the one that looks like they might be. I would pick them like they could be a really good regular season team with the way they're built. I don't trust anything that Jason Kidd has said during training camp in the preseason. If I'm a Mavs fan, would have me fucking scared. Actually, pardon my French there. Some of the stuff he said.
You don't like that Jason Kidd said he only wants to put up 15 threes a game?
Yeah, or wants Kristaps Porzingis to dribble into more mid-range jumpers and get in the post more. No, that scares. If I'm a Mavs fan, that scares the hell out of me. Tony, is there anything about this team or anyone on this team I did not ask you about that you think needs to be discussed before I release you?
No, I think we've covered it. I think we've had a really good conversation. This is dope. I love it.
Well, you heard it here first. Jared Butler, Rookie of the Year pick. Both Tony and I are predicting it at this point. Tony,
wait a minute. See now, wait a minute. I didn't say anything about
aggregators alert. Tony, Jared Butler is going to win Rookie of the Year.
I knew your carb load and your caffeine would take over at some point.
It's kicking in.
Now
the caffeine I took is kicking in, and I had some ice cream before this podcast, so I think that's reaching my veins as well.
I knew that this would kick in. I just said that Jared Butler might. Listen, aggregators. I predict Jared Butler to be the 10th man for the Utah Jazz.
A top 10 player in the NBA. Yes, that's what I heard too. Tony, are you able to tell our listeners where they can find you and the awesome work that you do?
You can find me at The Athletic, and you can find me at T Jones on the NBA on Twitter. And you can find me at T Jones Athletic on Instagram.
Ooh, you're on Instagram.
Yes, but I post a lot of pictures of my kids on Instagram and a lot of pictures of me in the gym. So, but I also post like videos and jazz stuff. So if you actually like me as a person, you can follow me on Instagram.
I'll follow you exclusively for the gym pics. That's what I'm going to follow you for on Instagram.
Absolutely.
I will say you're a great follower on Twitter because you interact with your followers, and you also, I don't remember what exactly it was, but I read it. I sent it to some of my friends. The quote tweet you had this year where someone was saying to you like, well, why aren't they testing for like HIV and herpes at the games? And you quoted it with, are you trying to smash at a basketball game? And I just couldn't stop laughing when I saw that. I sent it to so many people. I was giggling like I was in elementary school.
I mean, well, that was where my mind went. Like he asked me why they're not texting for sexually transmitted diseases at the basketball game, and I was confused immediately. Like, wait a minute, are we trying to watch basketball games, or are we trying to make babies? Like, pick one or the other, pick a lane. So I didn't think you could do both at a basketball game. So I mean, for me, me having fun at the basketball game is when I go and get a Diet Coke and some Skittles at halftime, okay? My man was on a totally different plane. He was like, yo, I mean, we need to test for STDs and we need to do all this. And I was like, wait a minute, what are you doing at halftime of this game?
Yeah, it's like, does the NBA have like an OnlyFans league that I didn't know about or something? But
I mean, listen, those were valid questions at the time.
If that's not an endorsement of why to follow Tony on Twitter, though, I don't know what else could be at this point. I mean, he does do great work at The Athletic. So just to reiterate, at T Jones on the NBA on Twitter, spelled exactly as it sounds. Tony, thank you for giving me an hour of your time on this Sunday night. I really appreciate it. And I think, as you know by now, given the amount of times that I will DM you too, I'm going to pester you again in the future.
Hey, listen, it is all good, bro. And I appreciate you for having me on. And listen, everybody needs to know how flexible Dan was with me, because I ran into some father issues at a previous time that we were supposed to record, and he really, he was just like, no problem, yada yada yada, we're good. And I just want to let you know how appreciative I was for you being really understanding with that.
I am blushing red right now. You're too kind. I think the least I could do is be flexible when you give me this much of your time, and as someone who does not have the responsibility of children. So kids, family, definitely more important than this rinky-dink operation over at Hardwood Knocks. Thank you so much again, though, Tony. This was great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hi, I'm comedian Jamel Johnson. My podcast, NBA Storytime, tells basketball tales so strange you didn't know that you didn't know them. Then we sit down with basketball and comedy folks to talk about what we've learned. So gather around and listen up because it's story time. Available wherever you get your podcasts.